Malcolm, and I'm the Executive Director of Art House Dallas. We're so glad that you decided to join us for our Origin series as we look at On Becoming. Specifically, what that looks like is exploring God's created world and the way that we interact with the world around us. Art House Dallas is a community that desires to learn and to grow together. Our community is made up of poets and songwriters, of painters, visual artists, writers, entrepreneurs, and so much more. We believe that beauty shown through arts, culture, and creation holds a powerful ability to form the way we think, interact, and see the world around us. As creatures made in the image of the Triune God, we believe that we must consider our ideas, our senses, our emotions, and our formation. Art House Dallas works in several different areas, in the visual arts, writing, music, and spiritual formation. And Origin is just one of those ways that you can connect with us. This year, we put together this reader. It's a collection of meditations that will follow our series On Becoming. We encourage you to go to our website and pick up one of these. It's meant to be a companion for you to follow along throughout summer months and into the fall. Additionally, in light of everything with coronavirus, we have moved all of our programming online. We desire to see our community safe, and we want to provide a way to still gather in light of our current circumstances. I want to encourage you, if you have been moved, compelled, or motivated by our work or this program in any way, please consider a tax-deductible donation that supports our work. Your donations and your generosity allows us to offer free programming like Origin for the community. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Hi, my name is Dustin Messer. I'm one of the ministers here at All Saints Dallas, and it is a huge honor to be able to talk with you about living locally. It's an honor because it's a subject I've been thinking about a lot for the past 5 years. I've been writing a dissertation that focuses on theology, sociology. Eric Jacobson, who wrote the essay that we read, has served on my committee, and I've tried to give a lot of thought for the past 5 years about how Christians should approach their place. But it's a specific honor to talk with you because it wasn't a sociologist or a theologian who got me interested in locality. It was an artist. When I went to college in Kentucky, I remember going to a used bookstore. I went to the local section and the books were in alphabetical order according to author's last name. I started at A, and it didn't take me too long before I got to the B section and I found Wendell Berry. I pulled a novel down, and in his art, he painted a picture for me, a vision of life in which localities and our attention to those localities really mattered. And so I spent the next several years of my life thinking, does local living actually matter? Or is this just sort of a romantic view? And because of things like globalization, which pulls us all over the world, or technology, which changes the way we work and interface in our neighborhoods, does local living really matter? And so I'm extremely happy to tell you today, local living really does matter. It isn't just something beautiful. It isn't just something good, but it's also something true. So in the next couple of minutes, I want to talk to us about why localities matter, some obstacles to living locally, and then finally some opportunities. So first of all, why do localities matter? Well, there's a Harvard sociologist named Robert Sampson, and he uses a term to talk about the importance of our locality. So think neighborhoods, think the immediate surrounding streets of your house. The word he uses to talk about the health of your place is collective efficacy. Collective efficacy can be judged in several different ways. One interesting way is Sampson, for at Harvard, is at the University of Chicago, which of course, as you know, is broken up according to neighborhoods. Sampson and his graduate assistants at Chicago got some mail, they postmarked the mail, and they set the mail next to some postal places. In other words, someone would be walking by and they would maybe put the piece of mail in the mailbox, or maybe they wouldn't. And they studied in the various neighborhoods how likely was it that that mail would get turned in, and the results ranged from 0% to 82%. Now, here's what's interesting about that. That number correlated, says Sampson, with things like infant mortality, the rate of teen pregnancy, and the general health and well-being of the citizenry in that neighborhood. Think about that for a second. If the mail gets delivered back, the children are more healthy. It's predictive for things like childhood diabetes. If the neighbors don't return the mail, if they aren't attentive to the streets, it suggests an extremely unhealthy neighborhood, not just an unpleasant place to live, but a genuinely unhealthy place to be. You see, healthy neighborhoods create healthy neighbors. It isn't just that our place is shaped by our virtue, but it's the institutions around us shape our virtues. And so we could go on and on about the statistical reasons why our localities still matter, despite the fact that we do live in a globalized world, despite the fact that people do move around more. Nevertheless, neighborhoods really matter. But let's talk about some obstacles to living locally. One of the great commentators on what makes America America was Alexis de Tocqueville. And here was his keen insight on what made America different from specifically Great Britain. He says, whereas in Britain there was a top-down monarchy, America lived in what he called townships. And these townships are bottom-up. That is, they're attuned to the locality around them. Mark Dunkelman at Brown sort of riffs on this. And instead of talking about townships, he talks about the middle rings of society. He says, we have inner rings, which are our immediate family, our mom, our dad, our brother, our sister, our kids. And we have outer rings. Outer rings are things like our status as a Republican or as a Democrat. Maybe being a member of some fandom like Star Trek fan club or something like that. These outer rings are really accessible through the internet, and then our inner rings are something to which we're born. Middle rings, he says, are the townships. Middle rings are formal or informal voluntary associations which we give ourselves to. And these middle rings of society are what caused the cleavage between the early colonial Americas and the Brits. See, the Brits understood the outer ring and the inner ring, but the Americans had something unique, robust middle rings. Now, today, much is made of the collapse of the nuclear family, the inner ring, and no doubt the nuclear family is facing a unique crisis in the West, but those numbers can be overblown. For example, while 50% of parents had weekly conversations with their kids in 1986, today some 67% of moms report having conversations with their adult children. We're actually communicating with our inner ring more today than we were 20 or 30 years ago. And as you know, we are ascribing more of our sense of self to our outer rings, to our political party, and so forth. So here's the upshot of the problem. If we're spending more time in our inner rings, committing more of our identity to outer rings, what gets left out? What gets left out is the middle ring of society. And that's a problem because these middle rings, these voluntary associations, which are local, help us be better citizens. G.K. Chesterton commends townships this way, quote, "The man who lives in a small community lives in a much larger world. He knows much more of the fierce varieties and uncompromising divergences of men. The reason is obvious. In a large community, we can choose our companion. In a small community, our companions are chose for us." You see, as tense as our immediate family, those inner ring circles can be sometimes, as much as we debate and fight, our immediate family tends to resemble us quite a bit. And of course, we choose our outer rings. Therefore, we never get exposed to people who have different perspectives. We live, as a matter of fact, in a smaller world, in a globalized world. As goes the middle ring of society, de Tocqueville's townships, Edmund Burke called this our little platoons. John Richard Newhouse called these intermediate institutions. As these things go, so goes politics at large. We live in larger echo chambers. Dunkelman says this, a long quote, but I'll quote him. Natural rhythms once put Americans from different stations in touch at the store, on the street, in the newspaper, even at church. Until fairly recently, the cross-section of people who live near one another and pass the same billboards and watch the same TV shows and listen to the same radio stations and so on, whatever divided them, issues of race or ethnicity, political creed or religious affiliation, they were more familiar, if only perfunctorily, with the way in which others approached the world. So you see, weak institutions lead to weak neighborhoods, which leads to, sadly, what we see on news today, a fractured republic. The great Catholic journalist Tim Carney has done some great work on this. And while he laments the weakening and demise of all institutions, he laments the demise of one institution in particular, the church. You see, he says, wealthy neighborhoods do just fine around secular institutions. The upper middle class, the enclaves of college, well-educated, married parents can afford other institutions to keep them going. But, he says, what the last 60 years in America has proved is that for middle class and working class, there are two options available to them: strong religious communities or alienation and collapse. Carney, in fact, shows that where there are robust townships, robust institutions and neighborhoods, politics is actually more cordial. There's less populism. This explains, for instance, why in 2016, every politician who ran under a populist banner did quite poorly in those counties in Michigan and Iowa and Utah. Why? Because in those places, there was a thick, robust religious life. Quote, the happiness in these places, these towns in Iowa, Michigan, and Mormon, and Utah, the happiness in these places does not depend on the name of the church or on the Dutch blood. It is tied directly to strong institutions of civil society held together by a common purpose. Their institutions are rooted in the church, and their purpose is defined and articulated by the church. You see, there's more religious a place, the stronger the institution. The stronger the institution, the better the place. The better the place, the happier and healthier the people. And except in those places, those very wealthy places where people can afford to send their kids on sports leagues and join a yoga class, except in those places, we are seeing a sicker and more lonely people. That's kind of a bleak picture, isn't it? These obstacles. However, there are opportunities, and this will sort of bring me to a close here. Opportunities for engagement. In his great book, A New Heaven and a New Earth, J. Richard Middleton makes this point, which I never noticed before, that in Revelation 21:3, there's a shift from the singular to the plural when referencing God's people. So this is Revelation 21:3. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man, singular. He will dwell with them, and they will be his peoples, plural. And God himself will be with them. This, Middleton shows, is the general thrust of the whole Bible. That God calls Abraham and says, Abraham, your kids will be as many as the stars in the sky, the sand in the seashore. But the surprise of the New Testament is that his children will be made up of every tongue, nation, and tribe. The biblical story, we could say then, moves from Abraham, a person, to a people, Israel, back to another person, Jesus, to all peoples. That means you and I are living in the people's part of the story. That the body of Christ is made up of every ethnicity, every tongue, every tribe. And we not only see that by looking at the global church, as beautiful as it is, we see it when we look at local churches in which ethnicity, class, race, nothing divides, but the spirit of Pentecost, which gives common tongue, is present. Indeed, the church is nothing less than the present inbreaking of Christ's inclusive reign. The melting of homogeneous worship is a sign that the spring of Pentecost is here. And so, while there's opportunities for me and you to be involved in all sorts of institutions, There is one institution which has supernatural origin. Jesus did not promise to the Lions Club the gates of hell would not prevail against it. As Leslie Newbegin says, the church does not live by its organizations or its programs. Rather, it lives by the word of God given to it as words spoken and acted. In conclusion, the connection between collective efficacy, healthy neighborhoods, strong institutions, and our neighbors' physical and spiritual well-being is settled for me. The question is, will you and I lean in to make our places more healthy? Will we attend to the places in which we find ourselves? And as I'm talking to you, artists, I specifically just want to remind you of a kid moving to Kentucky across the country to go to college and discovering a beautiful piece of art by someone who cares for localities. I hope what you take away from this talk, and I hope what you take away from your readings and your guide, is that localities do indeed matter. Yes, it's romantic. Yes, it's beautiful, but it's more true than perhaps we knew before. I hope you join me in the renewal of our neighborhoods and the renewal of our republic. Thank you.
Let us be known by our love in every word, in every deed. Honor the Son. Let our light shine in every eye. Let us be known by our love, for the glory of the Father, for the glory of the Son, for the glory of the Spirit. Let us be known by our love. Let us be known by our joy in every home, in every heart. Sing to the Lord. Let our lives show goodness and hope. Let us be known by our joy, for the glory of the Father, for the glory of the Son, for the glory of the Spirit. Let us be known by our joy. And let us be known by our peace in every town, in every tribe. Jesus is King. Let us go forth, heal and restore. Let us be known ourselves.